The iron shackles bit deep into his wrists as they dragged him through the gates of Fort McAllister, his blood painting crimson drops in the snow. Behind him lay his decimated village, his fallen brothers, and the smoking remains of everything he had ever called home. Ahead waited only the cold promise of a rope, the jeers of soldiers, and the slow death of a caged eagle. But as Ayanna Delacroix looked up from her kitchen window that bitter February morning of 1876, watching the broken Apache warrior stumble past, she saw something else entirely. She saw a man whose eyes held the same profound loneliness that had haunted her own reflection for 23 years. The capture. The blizzard had been merciless that winter, blanketing the Colorado Territory in a shroud of white that seemed to muffle even hope itself. Fort McAllister stood like a defiant scar against the pristine landscape, its wooden walls and stone foundations a testament to mankind's determination to impose order upon the wilderness. Inside those walls, the rhythms of military life continued with clockwork precision: reveille at dawn, drills in the afternoon, and the constant undercurrent of tension that came from living on the edge of two worlds. Ayanna had grown accustomed to this life, though she had never truly embraced it. The daughter of a French trapper and a woman whose Cherokee blood she rarely spoke of, she existed in that peculiar space between acceptance and otherness. Her skills in the kitchen had earned her a position at the fort, but her mixed heritage and unmarried status kept her forever at arm's length from the tight community of officers' wives and enlisted men's families. She found solace in her work, in the simple alchemy of transforming raw ingredients into nourishment, and in the quiet hours before dawn when she could step outside and remember what freedom felt like. The prisoner had been brought in during one of those quiet hours. She had been kneading dough for the morning bread when the commotion began. The thunder of hooves, the shouted orders, the clank of weapons and chains. Through her small window she watched as they hauled him from his horse, this man who moved with the fluid grace of running water even in his bonds. He was tall and lean, his long black hair matted with blood and snow, his buckskin clothing torn and stained. But it was his face that stopped her breath. Sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw. Yes, but more than that, eyes that held depths she recognized, a pain that mirrored her own. Caught this one trying to slip past our patrol, she heard Sergeant Mills announce to Colonel Patterson. Found him alone, no weapons except this. Mills held up a medicine bag, its beadwork catching the pale morning light. Apache, the colonel asked, his voice carrying the weary tone of a man who had seen too many such mornings. Yes, sir. Won't speak English, or won't admit to it. Ayanna pressed closer to the window, watching as they forced the warrior to his knees in the snow. Colonel Patterson approached, his boots crunching with authority. What's your name, boy? The Apache raised his head, meeting the colonel's gaze with unflinching dignity. When he spoke, his voice was like distant thunder, words in his native tongue that seemed to carry both defiance and sorrow. Lock him up, Patterson ordered. We'll send word to the reservation. They'll want to know we caught one of the raiders. As they dragged him toward the makeshift prison, little more than a reinforced storage shed, the warrior's eyes swept across the compound. For just a moment, his gaze found hers through the window. Time seemed to crystallize, that single shared glance carrying the weight of recognition, of two souls acknowledging their kinship across an impossible divide. The connection. His name, she would later learn, was Nalnish, he who listens to the wind. But in those first days, he was simply the silent man in the prison shed, the one who accepted his meager portions of food without complaint, and spent his hours in what appeared to be meditation. Ayanna found excuses to pass by his prison during her daily routines, drawn by a compulsion she couldn't name. It was during her third such visit that he spoke. You watch me, he said in perfect English, his voice carrying only the faintest trace of accent. Why? Ayanna nearly dropped the bucket of scraps she was carrying to the pigs. She glanced around quickly, ensuring they were alone, then stepped closer to the small barred window of his cell. You speak English. Many things I do not speak of. His face appeared at the window, and she was struck again by the intensity of his gaze. But you are not like them. I work here. I prepare their food. That is not what I mean. He studied her face carefully. You have the look of someone who understands what it means to walk between worlds. The observation hit her like a physical blow. No one at the fort had ever spoken to her with such directness, such immediate understanding. My mother was Cherokee, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. And your father, French, a trapper. He died when I was 12. Nalnish nodded slowly. The soldiers, they killed my family 3 days ago. My wife, my daughter. His voice remained steady, but she saw his hands clench. I was hunting when they came to our winter camp. When I returned, there was only smoke and silence. Ayanna's heart constricted. I'm sorry. Sorry is a word. What I need is justice. He paused, then added more quietly, or revenge. I have not decided which. Is that why you were alone, seeking revenge? I was seeking death, but they captured me before I could find it. The raw honesty of his words left her breathless. She had known loneliness, had felt the ache of not belonging, but she had never known the kind of devastation that would make death seem preferable to drawing another breath. "What was her name?" she asked softly. "Your daughter." His composed mask cracked for just an instant. "Ayanna. It means eternal blossom." The coincidence struck them both silent. Ayanna pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat quicken. That's my name too." Nalange stared at her through the bars, something shifting in his expression. "Then perhaps the spirits have brought us together for a reason." From that day forward, their conversations became a lifeline for both of them. She would bring him extra food, small comforts that she smuggled from the kitchen, and in return he shared stories of his people, their traditions, their connection to the land that surrounded the fort. He told her of vision quests and sacred ceremonies, of the way the wind carried messages for those who knew how to listen. She, in turn, spoke of her own struggles with identity, her mother's stories of the Trail of Tears, her father's dreams of a life lived free in the wilderness. "Your mother," Nalange said one evening as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "She taught you to cook the old ways?" "Some. Wild plants, how to prepare game. But mostly I learned from the fort's cook before me." Ayanna adjusted her shawl against the evening chill. "She said I had good hands for the work." "Good hands," he repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, healing hands. I have watched you with the soldiers who are injured. You bring them food but also comfort. It's nothing, just kindness. Kindness is everything." His fingers appeared through the bars, not quite touching hers, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. "In my language we have a saying, the heart that gives receives the greater gift." As the days turned into weeks, something deeper began to grow between them. It was more than attraction, more than the simple companionship of two lonely souls. It was recognition, the kind that comes once in a lifetime, if at all. They began to speak of dreams, of the life that might exist beyond the walls of the fort and the boundaries of their respective worlds. "If you could go anywhere," she asked him one night, "where would it be?" Nalange was quiet for a long moment. "There is a place, far to the north in the high country. My grandfather told me stories of valleys there where the snow never fully melts, where the rivers run clear and the game is plentiful. He said it was where our people came from before the world changed. It sounds beautiful. Would you like to see it? If such a thing were possible." The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ayanna found herself imagining it, leaving everything behind, riding north into the wilderness with this man who understood her in ways no one ever had. It was impossible, of course. She was needed at the fort, and he was a prisoner awaiting transport to the reservation. But in the growing twilight, impossibility seemed less absolute. "Yes," she whispered, "I would." The plan. Colonel Patterson gathered his staff for the morning briefing, and Ayanna, serving coffee and clearing dishes, overheard the decision that would change everything. "Transport arrives next Monday," the colonel announced. "We'll finally be rid of our Apache friend. The reservation agents want him delivered along with the regular supply run." Ayanna's hands trembled as she set down the coffee pot. Monday was 5 days away. 5 days before Nalange would be taken to the reservation, a place she knew from whispered conversations was little better than a slow death sentence. Disease, starvation, and despair claimed as many lives there as any battlefield. That evening she approached his cell with unusual urgency. "They're taking you away," she said without preamble. Monday, Nalange received the news with characteristic stoicism, but she saw the slight tightening around his eyes. "To the reservation." "Yes, then I will die there, slowly, instead of quickly here. Perhaps it is better. I will have time to make peace with my ancestors' spirits." "No." The word came out more forcefully than she had intended. "You don't understand. You can't go there. You can't give up. What would you have me do? These walls are stone and wood. The guards are armed and watchful." Ayanna glanced around, ensuring they were alone, then leaned closer to the window. "The back wall of your cell. The mortar is old, crumbling. I've been watching the maintenance crews. They haven't reinforced it in months. You have been planning this. I've been thinking about it." She pulled a small tool from beneath her apron, a metal file she had taken from the blacksmith's supplies. "If you worked at it, quietly, a little each night." Nalange stared at the file, then at her face. "If they discover you helped me, they will court-martial you. They might hang you for treason. If I don't help you, you'll die anyway. At least this way, one of us has a chance." "Ayanna." The way he spoke her name made her heart race. "If I escape, I cannot take you with me. Not immediately. They will be watching, hunting. It would be too dangerous." "I know. Then why?" She met his gaze directly. "Because I love you." The words hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. She had not planned to say them, but once spoken she felt their truth resonate in her bones. "And I love you," he replied quietly. "Which is why I cannot let you sacrifice yourself for me. It's not sacrifice if it's chosen freely." She pressed the file through the bars, their fingers touching briefly as he took it. "Promise me something." "What?" "That you'll find that place your grandfather told you about. That you'll be free." Nalnish closed his eyes, the file disappearing into his clothing. "I promise, but I make you a promise in return." "What?" "If you are imprisoned for this, I will come back for you." "You can't. It would be suicide. Love makes warriors of us all," he said simply, "and warriors do not abandon those they love." The escape. The work took 3 nights. Nalnish labored in careful silence, filing away at the ancient mortar while the guards dozed at their posts. Ayana found excuses to walk past his cell, her presence both a lookout and a comfort. During the day, he concealed his progress with mud and debris, making the wall appear unchanged. On Friday night, as snow began to fall again, he made his break. The hole he had created was barely large enough for a man of his size, but desperation lent him flexibility. He emerged into the fort's rear courtyard just after midnight, moving like a shadow across the snow-covered ground. Ayana waited by the kitchen door with a bundle of supplies, food, warm clothing, and her father's old knife. "There's a horse tethered behind the supply shed," she whispered. "Old Murphy won't be missed until morning." Nalnish took the bundle, then reached for her hands. "Come with me." "I can't. They'll know I helped you escape if I disappear the same night. But if I stay, they might not suspect." "Ayana, go." She pushed him gently toward the shadows. "Find your grandfather's valley. I'll find a way to follow when I can." He pulled her close then, kissing her with a passion that spoke of love and farewell and desperate hope all at once. "I will come back for you," he promised against her lips. "I swear it by the spirits of my ancestors." Then he was gone, vanishing into the swirling snow like a dream she might have imagined. The consequence. They discovered his escape at dawn. Sergeant Mills's roar of fury could be heard throughout the compound as he stared at the hole in the cell wall. Colonel Patterson arrived moments later, his face thunderous. "How?" was all he said. "Someone helped him, sir. Had to. He couldn't have done this alone." The investigation began immediately. They questioned every soldier, every civilian, anyone who might have had access to the prisoner. Ayana maintained her innocence, but she could see the suspicion growing in their eyes. She had been seen near the cell too often, had shown too much interest in the Apache's welfare. The breakthrough came when they found the file, discarded in the snow outside the fort's walls. It was traced back to the blacksmith's shop, and from there, the web of suspicion tightened around those who had access to the smithy's tools.
"Miss Delacroix," Colonel Patterson said on Sunday evening, his voice cold with certainty, "you will come with me."
They arrested her in the kitchen, binding her hands as she had so often seen them bind others. The irony was not lost on her. The woman who had fed them, cared for them, was now their prisoner. "You're a fool," Patterson told her, as they locked her in the same cell that had held Nalnish. "That savage would have killed you the moment you were no longer useful to him." "You don't know him," she replied. "I know his kind. I know what they do to white women." "I'm not white," she said quietly. "Not entirely, but I don't expect you to understand the difference." The colonel's face reddened. "You'll hang for this. Treason in time of war is a capital offense." "Are we at war, Colonel? I thought we were at peace." "There is no peace with animals." That night, alone in the cell that still carried traces of Nalnish's presence, Ayana wondered if she had made the right choice. The stone wall seemed to close in around her, and for the first time she truly understood the desperation that had driven him to seek death rather than captivity. But then she remembered his promise, and despite everything, she smiled. The return. Nalnish had traveled north for 2 days before the dreams began. In them, he saw Ayana behind bars, saw the fear in her eyes, heard her calling his name across an impossible distance. On the 3rd night, as he sheltered in a cave high in the mountains, the dreams became a vision. His grandfather appeared to him in the firelight, ancient and wise and impossibly present. "You run from your destiny, grandson. I run toward freedom, grandfather. Freedom without love is just another kind of prison." The old man's eyes were sad but knowing. "The woman who freed you, she pays the price for your escape." Nalnish's heart clenched. "I cannot go back. It would be madness. Love is madness. It is also the only thing that makes life worth living. If I return, we will both die. Perhaps, or perhaps you will both live, truly live, for the first time." His grandfather's form began to fade. "The choice is yours, grandson. But remember, a warrior who saves only himself has saved nothing at all." When Nalnish woke, the vision's truth burned in his chest like a living coal. He had promised to return for her, and she had trusted him with that promise. Could he live with himself if he broke it now? The journey back took him through terrain he knew like his own heartbeat, but he had never traveled it with such urgency. He moved by night, slept in hidden places during the day, and planned an escape that seemed impossible even to him. The rescue. He returned on a Thursday night, 2 weeks after his escape. The fort was more heavily guarded now, sentries posted at every corner. patrols walking the perimeter in regular intervals. But Nolnish had advantages they couldn't account for. He knew their routines, their blind spots, and most importantly, he had the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. Ayanna had been moved to a more secure cell in the basement of the administration building. Through careful observation, Nolnish learned that she was to be transported to Denver for trial the following week. If he was going to act, it had to be now. He approached from the riverside of the fort, where the walls were lowest and the guards least vigilant. The spring thaw had begun, making the stones slippery but also masking the sound of his movements. He scaled the wall like a shadow, moving with the patience and precision of a hunter stalking prey. The guard at the administration building's rear entrance was young, inexperienced, prone to dozing at his post. Nolnish waited until the man's breathing deepened, then struck with the speed of a striking snake. The guard crumpled without a sound. Finding Ayanna's cell required precious minutes of careful searching. When he finally discovered her, huddled in the corner of a stone room that smelled of dampness and despair, his heart nearly broke. "I told you I would come back," he whispered through the bars. Ayanna looked up, certain she was dreaming. "Nolnish, how? Love makes warriors of us all. Remember." He was already working on the lock with tools he had fashioned from metal scraps. "Can you walk?" "I think so." She struggled to her feet, weak from poor food and little exercise. "They're planning to hang me, not if I can help it." The lock clicked open, and he pulled the cell door wide. "Come, we don't have much time." But as they emerged from the building, they found their path blocked by Sergeant Mills and 3 armed soldiers. "Going somewhere?" Mills drawled, his rifle trained on Nolnish's chest. "Let her go," Nolnish said calmly. "Your quarrel is with me." "Oh, I think our quarrel is with both of you now." Mills's smile was cold and cruel. "The colonel's going to be real pleased when he hears we caught his escaped savage and his traitor girlfriend." "Run," Ayanna whispered. "Not without you." "How touching," Mills sneered. "Don't worry, you'll hang together. Real romantic-like." But Nolnish had not survived years of warfare by accepting defeat easily. In one fluid motion, he grabbed a handful of sand from the ground and flung it at the soldiers' faces. In the confusion that followed, he tackled Mills, wrestling for control of the rifle. "Run," he shouted to Ayanna. "The horses by the gate." The chase. What followed was a desperate flight across terrain that shifted from familiar to foreign with each mile they covered. Behind them came the thunder of pursuit, a dozen soldiers led by Sergeant Mills, all of them determined to recapture the escaped prisoners and exact their revenge. Ayanna had never been much of a rider, but fear and adrenaline gave her skills she didn't know she possessed. She clung to her horse's mane as they raced through the night, following Nolnish as he led them along paths that seemed to exist only in his memory. "Where are we going?" she called out during a brief rest at a stream crossing. "North," he replied, scanning the horizon for signs of their pursuers. "To my grandfather's valley. If we can reach the high country, we can lose them in the snow. And if we can't," he met her gaze directly, "then we face whatever comes together." The chase continued for 3 days. Each night they caught glimpses of campfires behind them, heard the distant sound of horses and men who would not give up. Mills, it seemed, had taken their escape as a personal affront. On the 3rd day, disaster struck. Ayanna's horse stepped wrong while crossing a rocky stream, and she fell hard, her ankle twisting beneath her with an audible crack. "I can't," she gasped, trying to stand. "Go without me." "Never." Nolnish helped her onto his horse, then climbed up behind her. "We ride together or not at all." But the double burden slowed them considerably, and by evening they could see their pursuers clearly on the horizon. There was nowhere left to run. They made their final camp in a small canyon, surrounded by walls of red rock that glowed like fire in the setting sun. Nolnish built a small fire while Ayanna tended to her injured ankle as best she could. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "If not for me, you would have reached your grandfather's valley. Without you, reaching that valley would have meant nothing." He sat beside her, taking her hand in his. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "The vision quest I took as a young man, before I married, before I had a daughter. The spirits showed me a woman with eyes like yours, a woman who would change the course of my life. I thought that woman was my wife, but now I understand. It was you. It was always you." Ayanna felt tears gather in her eyes. "Even if we die here, especially if we die here, some loves are too powerful for death to contain." They spent the night talking, sharing stories, making love with the tenderness of people who know their time is limited. When dawn came, so did their pursuers. Sergeant Mills appeared at the canyon's mouth with his men, all of them armed and ready for a fight. "End of the line, Apache," Mills called out. "Come down peaceful, and maybe the lady won't suffer too much before we hang her." Nolnish stood slowly, his hands empty, but his posture radiating dangerous calm. "You want me, Mills? Come and take me." "Oh, I will. But first I think I'll have some fun with your squaw. Show her what a real man feels like." The words were barely out of Mills's mouth before Nolnish moved. He had concealed a knife in his boot, and now it flew through the air with deadly accuracy. Mills screamed as the blade buried itself in his shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing to the ground. The other soldiers opened fire, but Nalnish had already rolled behind cover, pulling Ayana with him. Bullets ricocheted off the canyon walls as the standoff began. "There's another way out," Nalnish whispered urgently. "A path up the back wall, but you'll have to climb. My ankle, I'll help you." But we move now, while they're focused on the front. The escape to freedom. The climb was agony for Ayana, each step sending fire through her injured ankle. But Nalnish's strength and determination carried them both, his hand steady and sure as he guided her up the treacherous rock face. Behind them, the soldiers had discovered their absence and were scrambling to follow. But the Apache warrior knew this country in ways his pursuers never could, and he led Ayana along paths that seemed to exist only for them. They emerged onto a high plateau just as the sun crested the mountains, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. Below them, the soldiers' shouts grew fainter, lost in the vastness of the landscape. "Look," Nalnish said softly. Ayana followed his gaze and gasped. Spread out before them was a valley of impossible beauty. Green meadows dotted with wildflowers, a crystal-clear river winding through aspen groves, snow-capped peaks standing sentinel on all sides.
"Your grandfather's valley?"
Yes, his voice was filled with wonder, just as he described it. They made their way down into the valley, leaving the sounds of pursuit far behind. Here, in this hidden paradise, they found what they had been seeking all along, not just freedom from their pasts, but freedom to build something new together. The new beginning. They built their cabin beside the river, using skills passed down through generations of their respective peoples. Nalnish's knowledge of the land and its seasons combined with Ayana's practical abilities to create a home that was both shelter and sanctuary. The soldiers never found them. Miles later learned that the patrol had given up the chase after losing their trail in the high country, reporting that the fugitives had likely perished in the wilderness. It was a story that served everyone's purposes. The military could claim justice had been served, while Nalnish and Ayana could begin their new life without fear of discovery. Their first winter was hard but joyful. They learned each other's languages, shared the stories and traditions of their peoples, and built a love that transcended the boundaries that had once seemed insurmountable. When spring came, Ayana discovered she was carrying their first child. "What will we call him?" she asked, her hand resting on her growing belly as they watched the sunset paint the valley walls in shades of rose and gold. "If it's a son, we'll call him Bidziel, he who is strong. If a daughter," Nalnish smiled, "maybe Ayana, after two strong women I have known. Two, my first daughter, and the woman who gave me back my life." Years passed. They raised their children in the valley, teaching them to honor both sides of their heritage, to see strength in diversity rather than conflict. They were visited occasionally by other outcasts and refugees, Native Americans fleeing the reservations, mixed-blood families seeking acceptance, even a few whites who had grown tired of civilization's constraints. All were welcomed, and gradually, their hidden valley became a small community built on the radical idea that love and respect mattered more than the color of one's skin or the language of one's prayers. Nalnish and Ayana grew old together in their mountain paradise, their love deepening with each passing season. When death finally came for them, it found them as they had lived in their later years, side by side, hands intertwined, watching the sunset paint their valley in colors that seemed to come from another world. Epilogue. The story of Nalnish and Ayana might have ended there, lost to time, like so many other tales of love and loss in the American West. But their children and grandchildren carried their legacy forward, spreading throughout the country as the years passed, taking with them the lesson their ancestors had learned in that hidden valley. In the end, their story became more than just a tale of two people who defied the prejudices of their time. It became a testament to a truth that transcends every boundary humans create, that love, real love, recognizes no borders, respects no artificial divisions, and acknowledges no authority higher than the human heart. In a world that too often chooses fear over understanding, separation over unity, their story reminds us that the deepest courage is not found in war or conquest, but in the simple, revolutionary act of seeing the humanity in someone the world has taught you to hate. And perhaps that is the greatest victory of all, not the defeat of enemies, but the transformation of strangers into family, of fear into love, of division into wholeness. In their hidden valley, Nalnish and Ayana proved that paradise is not a place we find, but a world we create, one act of love at a time.